Praying, reading the Bible, and attending church do not guarantee passing the final test. Jesus warned that many sincere believers, even leaders and pastors, will be left behind because they never examine their hearts. This account reveals the warning that almost no one wants to hear. My name is Sebastian Rafael Cortes Mendoza, and I live in the city of Querétaro, where for many years I worked as a civil engineer for a mid-sized construction company specializing in housing developments. I always considered myself a man of faith, a committed Christian who attended the evangelical church downtown 3 times a week without fail. I was an active participant in the men's group. I helped with the construction ministry whenever the church needed repairs, and I strove to live a life that honored God in every aspect. I had a wonderful wife named Patricia Elena and 2 teenage children. I believed my spiritual life was in order, that I was fully prepared for the second coming of Christ. I never imagined that everything I thought I knew about being ready for the rapture would be completely shattered by an experience that would change my life, and my eternity, forever. It was an ordinary Tuesday, one of those hot summer days when the sun scorches the pavement early on. I remember leaving home very early that morning, heading to a job site we were supervising in the city's industrial zone. The sun was just beginning to heat up as my white Ford pickup truck drove along the southern bypass connecting to the highway to San Juan del Rio. I had reviewed the blueprints the night before. I had my thermos of freshly brewed coffee with me, and I was mentally going over the instructions I would give the foreman regarding the installation of the concrete structures we needed to finish that week. Traffic was light at that hour, barely 6:30 in the morning, and I was driving calmly, listening to Christian music on the radio, without the slightest suspicion that within the next few minutes, my earthly life would come to an end in the most unexpected and violent way. What happened next occurred so quickly that my mind could barely process it at the time. A double-trailer truck hauling construction materials was speeding toward me from the opposite direction, moving far too fast for that time of day and that stretch of road. I later learned from traffic reports that the driver had fallen asleep at the wheel after driving all that night without a break. In violation of all safety regulations, I saw the exact moment the trucks began to drift into my lane, weaving dangerously. I had barely 2 seconds to try to dodge it by jerking the steering wheel toward the shoulder. But it was futile. The impact was so brutal that the front of my pickup truck crumpled instantly, as if it were made of paper. Glass shattered into thousands of shards that flew in every direction, and I felt a pain so sharp and searing shoot through my chest and head that I thought I was being torn in two. I heard the horrific sound of metal twisting and tearing apart, the deafening screech of tires, and then a sudden, absolute silence as everything around me plunged into total darkness. But that darkness lasted only an instant, for suddenly I found myself standing outside my physical body, observing the accident scene from a perspective that defied all logic and reason. I could see my truck completely wrecked, crushed against the guardrail on the right side of the road. Smoke was pouring from the engine, and there in the driver's seat lay my body, or what remained of it, motionless, bloodied, and clearly lifeless. It was the most surreal and disturbing image I had ever witnessed. I was looking at my own corpse from the outside, and although I intellectually knew that mangled body was mine, I felt completely alive and conscious, more awake and alert than I had ever been in my entire earthly existence. I felt no physical pain, no fear or panic. Instead, there was a strange sense of profound peace, a supernatural calm that made no sense given the horrific circumstances I was witnessing. I could see other vehicles beginning to stop, with drivers stepping out of their cars and trucks, expressions of horror and shock on their faces as they cautiously approached the wreckage. I heard their voices with perfect clarity, even though I was floating several meters away. Someone was shouting for an ambulance to be called. Another person said it looked like there were no survivors. A woman was weeping, her hands covering her mouth. I watched as a young man took out his cell phone and began making frantic calls to emergency services. I saw and heard all of this with heightened perception, as if all my senses were operating at a level far beyond the norm. And then, as I watched this terrible scene, I began to notice myself gradually rising, moving away from the accident site and ascending, as if an invisible force were gently pulling me up toward the sky. It was at that moment that I saw the light. It was unlike the sunlight that had risen that morning, nor was it like any artificial light I had ever seen in my life. It was a light that seemed to have a life of its own, pulsing with energy and power, radiating pure, tangible love, a light I could feel wrapping around me as if it was something physical. The light was white, yet it held every imaginable color within it, hues I had never seen on earth, shades that have no name in any human language. I felt irresistibly drawn to that light, not because I was being forced, but because my entire being yearned to draw closer to it, to merge with it, to know its source. I began to move upward more rapidly, and suddenly I found myself entering what I can only describe as a tunnel of pure light. The walls of this tunnel, if they could even be called walls, shone with an intensity that should have blinded me. Instead, they filled my spirit with a joy and peace that surpassed any emotional experience I had ever known in my life. As I traveled through this tunnel, I could hear music, but it was not music played on earthly instruments. It was as if all creation were singing in unison, a perfect symphony of angelic voices and celestial sounds that made every part of my spiritual being vibrate in perfect harmony. The sensation of movement was real and tangible, as if I were traveling at incredible speed, yet there was no wind or resistance, only this smooth, inexorable forward motion toward a source of light, even brighter and more intense. At the end of the tunnel, when I exited the tunnel and emerged on the other side, what I saw left me utterly speechless and breathless, unable to mentally process the magnificence of what I was witnessing. I found myself in a place I can only describe as a celestial garden, though that description falls woefully short of capturing the reality of what my spiritual eyes beheld. Every flower, every tree, and every blade of grass glowed with its own light, as if made of living, solidified light. The colors were so intense, so pure, and so vibrant that they made the colors of earth seem like pale, dull shadows by comparison. There were shades of green I had never seen before, blues deeper than the deepest ocean, and reds that burned with an intensity that did not scorch but instead filled me with life. The air, if it could even be called air, was heavy with fragrances that were a perfect blend of every beautiful flower I had ever smelled on earth, yet multiplied 1,000-fold in sweetness and purity. The sound of that place was equally indescribable. Music flowed from every direction, yet it was not music played on physical instruments. It was as if all creation itself were singing, vibrating with praise and resonating with adoration. I could hear angelic voices harmonizing in tones that pierced to the very depths of my soul, making every part of my being yearn to join in that eternal song of worship. The ground beneath my feet felt solid, yet weightless, as if I were walking upon something more real than anything on earth, yet unbound by the physical laws I had known all my life. There were rivers of crystal clear water flowing with a purity that made earthly water seem murky and polluted. These rivers shimmered with an inner light, making them appear as streams of liquid diamond flowing through the celestial landscape. It was in this heavenly garden, while I stood completely captivated, trying to take in the overwhelming beauty around me, that I saw him for the first time. A few meters away, standing amidst that glorious landscape, was Jesus. The moment my eyes fell upon him, my knees buckled involuntarily, and I dropped to the ground in instant worship. It was not a conscious decision, nor something I had planned to do. It was a completely automatic and irresistible reaction of my spirit upon finding itself in the presence of absolute holiness, perfect love, and infinite power. My entire being instantly recognized that I stood before the Creator of the universe, El Salvador del Mundo, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And the only possible response was to prostrate myself in complete adoration. His eyes were the first thing to capture my full attention. They were like living fire, flames burning with an intensity that pierced every layer of my soul, seeing everything I was, everything I had been, every thought I had ever harbored, every action I had taken, and every hidden motive deep within my heart. Yet these flames did not burn with destructive judgment. They burned with a love so pure, so intense, and so overwhelming that it made me want to weep and laugh at the same time. In his eyes, I could see all the compassion of the universe and all the mercy of God, yet also all the holiness and justice that cannot tolerate sin. It was both terrifying and comforting. At once, I felt completely exposed and vulnerable, yet also fully loved and accepted. His face was difficult to describe in human words because it seemed to shift constantly, not in physical form, but in expression. One moment I saw the tenderness of a loving father, the next, the majesty of a mighty king, then, the compassion of a healer, after that, the authority of a righteous judge. It was as if every facet of God's character was simultaneously visible in that glorious face. His robes were white, whiter than any snow I had ever seen, so white that they glowed with their own light, a light that made the sun seem like a feeble candle by comparison, and when he moved, even the slightest gesture carried a grace and authority that made it clear, this was one before whom the entire universe bowed in reverence. When he spoke, his voice was like the sound of many waters, powerful as a massive waterfall, yet soft as a gentle stream. It was a voice that could command entire galaxies, yet could also whisper words of comfort to the most broken heart. His voice filled the space around me but also resonated within my own spirit, as if speaking simultaneously from without and from within. "Sebastian," he said, and the mere sound of my name spoken by his lips made me begin to weep uncontrollably. Tears streamed freely down my face as my soul trembled at the reality of being in the presence of the one who knew me completely and loved me perfectly. Sebastian continued as he drew near and extended his hand to help me up. "You are here because there is something crucial I need to show you, something my people must understand before it is too late. Time is shorter than most realize, and there is a truth about my return that hardly anyone truly grasps, a truth that will determine the eternal destiny of millions who call themselves Christians but are not really prepared for the rapture." When I took his hand, I felt a current of pure energy flow through my entire spiritual being, as if every part of me were being renewed, strengthened, and cleansed. He helped me to my feet, and although I wanted to ask 1,000 questions about my family, about whether I was truly dead, and about what would happen to me now, all I could do was look at him and feel that overwhelming love radiating from him, like waves of heat from an intense fire. He began to walk with me through the heavenly garden, and as we walked side by side, he spoke with an urgency in his voice that caused every word to be deeply etched upon my spirit. "My son," he said as we walked among flowers singing his praise and trees swaying in worship, "you lived your life thinking you were prepared for my return. You attended church faithfully, participated in ministries, prayed regularly, and read your Bible, assuming that those religious activities alone guaranteed your readiness for the rapture. But there is something the vast majority of my followers do not understand, something I have tried to communicate through my word, yet which has been obscured by religious traditions and superficial teachings. There is a final test that will occur at the moment of the rapture, an examination of the heart that will reveal the true spiritual condition of every person who professes to be a Christian, and this test will determine who is taken to heaven and who is left behind to face the tribulation." As Jesus spoke these words, I noticed that we could suddenly see, through what appeared to be a spiritual or dimensional window, down to the earth. I could see millions of Christians in churches all over the world, in Mexico, the United States, Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Europe, in every continent and nation. I saw them praying fervently, singing worship songs with apparent passion, raising their hands in praise, and diligently studying their Bibles, all confident that they were ready for the rapture, all certain they would be taken when Christ returned. But then Jesus did something that left me completely disturbed and alarmed. He allowed me to see not only these people's outward actions but the true state of their hearts, and what I saw shook me to the very core of my being. "Look, Sebastian," Jesus said, pointing toward a pastor who was preaching passionately from the pulpit of a megachurch in Guadalajara, "that man knows all the correct doctrine regarding my second coming. He can quote dozens of verses about the rapture from memory. He has written books about the end times. He has taught entire series on how to be prepared, and he is fully convinced that he will be among those taken when I return. But now, look deeper, look at what I see when I examine his heart. As Jesus spoke those words, it was as if a veil of mist were lifted from my spiritual eyes, and suddenly I could see directly into that pastor's heart. What I saw left me speechless and deeply disturbed. Outwardly, that man appeared to be the perfect example of a leader. He was a dedicated and zealous Christian, but inside, when I looked into his true heart, I saw something entirely different. His heart was cold, distant, and mechanical. He preached about Jesus, but he didn't truly love Jesus. He served in the church, but he did it out of obligation, for reputation, for the recognition and position it afforded him, not out of genuine devotion to the Lord. His prayers were routine and empty, words that came out of his mouth, but didn't flow from a passionate heart. His Bible reading was academic. He studied the scriptures to prepare sermons and maintain his image as a theological expert. But there was no real hunger to know God more deeply. He did everything right outwardly, he fulfilled all the expectations of what a pastor should be and do, but his heart was spiritually dead, cold and indifferent to the person of Christ. Despite all his frenetic religious activity, this man will fail the final test, Jesus said with a sadness in his voice that literally broke my heart into pieces. He will fail because the test doesn't examine theological knowledge, religious activity, or ministerial position. The test examines love, genuine love for me, real love, not feigned, love that is more than outward words and actions, love that comes from the heart and manifests itself in genuine delight in my presence, in proven sacrifice for my sake, and in absolute supremacy in every area of life. And that love is completely absent from this man's heart. I felt a chill run through my spirit as I processed what Jesus had just said. The test of love, I repeated, trying to fully grasp the implications of those words. Lord, what exactly does this test of love mean? How does it work? What does it specifically examine? Jesus turned to me with eyes that held all the wisdom and compassion of the universe and began to explain something that would completely transform my understanding of what it means to be truly prepared for the rapture. Sebastian said with a seriousness that held my entire being's undivided attention, when I return to rapture my church, it will not simply be a matter of who prayed a prayer of salvation at some point in their life, or who attended church regularly, or who could quote Bible verses. At the time of the rapture, there will be an instantaneous, supernatural examination of the heart of every person who professes to be my follower, and this examination will reveal with absolute clarity the true nature of their relationship with me. This test of love has three main components, three aspects that together determine whether a person truly loves me in the way required to be taken in the rapture. To fail in any of these three aspects means being left behind when I come for my church. As Jesus spoke, he took me to another place in that heavenly realm. Suddenly, we were in what appeared to be a room that existed outside of normal time, a space where the past, present, and future seemed to converge simultaneously. On the walls of this room, if they can be called walls, I could see countless scenes unfolding as at the same time. As if observing multiple realities and timelines simultaneously, Jesus pointed toward these scenes and began to explain to me in detail every aspect of the test of love that would determine who would be raptured and who would be left behind to face the horrors of the tribulation. Examine whether you have genuine affection for me, Jesus explained with an intensity that made every word penetrate deeply into my soul. And when I say genuine affection, I am not speaking of temporary emotional enthusiasm that comes and goes depending on circumstances. I am not speaking of superficial feelings experienced during a particularly moving worship service, only to vanish when you leave the church. I am speaking of a deep, lasting satisfaction found in my presence, a real and constant delight in spending time with me, a genuine joy in knowing me better through my word, a sincere desire to communicate with me in prayer. Not because you have to, but because you genuinely want to. The problem with many of my followers is that they treat prayer as a tedious duty to be endured, Bible reading as a boring obligation fulfilled to maintain a religious routine, and worship as an empty ritual, something they suffer through because they think it is expected of them. But Sebastian, genuine love is not duty, genuine love is delight. True love does not merely endure time with the beloved, it enjoys it, yearns for it, and actively seeks it out. Jesus then showed me scenes of Christians around the world during their morning devotionals. The contrast between those with genuine affection and those without it was absolutely devastating to witness. I saw people literally radiant with joy as they prayed, their faces lit up with genuine pleasure as they conversed with God, their souls clearly delighting in that time of intimate communion. These were believers who truly loved being in God's presence, who found their greatest satisfaction in knowing Christ, and who would rather spend time with the Lord than do anything else. Their Christianity was not a burden they carried, but a delight they enjoyed. When they prayed, they were not fulfilling a religious obligation, they were conversing with someone they loved deeply and who they knew loved them perfectly in return. Yet I saw many others, the vast majority, in fact, who held a completely different attitude toward their devotional time. I saw a businessman in Monterey who would rise early every morning to spend time with God, but as he prayed, his eyes would constantly drift toward the clock on the wall, clearly eager to finish so he could get on with the important activities of his day. I saw a housewife in Mexico City who faithfully read her Bible every morning while having her coffee, yet her mind constantly wandered to her chores. 27 hours 5 minutes of the day, the shopping list she needed to make, the problems with her children, and she barely registered the words her eyes were mechanically scanning on the page. I saw a young university student in Puebla hurriedly reciting his nightly prayers, repeating the same generic phrases night after night without real thought or emotional connection, simply fulfilling a religious obligation before sleep. In each of these cases, the people kept up their spiritual disciplines and maintained their devotional routines. They could honestly say they prayed and read their Bibles regularly, but when Jesus allowed me to see their hearts, I clearly saw that there was no genuine affection there, there was no real delight, no true pleasure, no sincere joy. Jesus was not their satisfaction. He was an obligation. Time with God was not the highlight of their day. It was a duty they needed to fulfill to feel good about themselves spiritually, and the difference between these people and those with genuine affection was so obvious, so stark, that I wondered how they could not see it themselves. These will fail the test of genuine affection, Jesus said with deep sadness, no matter how consistent they are in their religious routines, no matter how many years they have kept up their devotionals, no matter how much biblical knowledge they have accumulated. They will fail because their love is not real, their devotion is mechanical, and their worship is empty. They know me out of obligation, not delight, and when the time of the rapture comes and their hearts are examined, this lack of genuine affection will be revealed, and they will be left behind, while those who truly love me and delight in me are taken home. My heart sank as I heard this, because I immediately began to examine my own heart and realized with horror that much of my devotional life had been exactly as Jesus was describing. I had prayed because I knew I ought to, not because I genuinely enjoyed doing it. I had read my Bible to maintain my routine and my image as a good Christian, rather than out of a real hunger to know God more deeply. I had gone to worship services because it was expected, not because my soul longed to enter God's presence. Jesus, I asked with a trembling voice, how does someone develop this genuine affection? How do we move from duty to delight? How do we transform our hearts from obligation to real love? Jesus looked at me with a smile holding so much love and hope that I felt my spirit soar. Despite the conviction I was feeling, Sebastian said to me, genuine affection is cultivated through real relationship, not through empty religious rituals. When you spend quality time with me, not merely going through a routine, but truly seeking to know me as a person, conversing with me honestly just as you would with your best friend, opening your heart vulnerably and authentically, and listening to my voice through my word with genuine attentiveness, something supernatural begins to happen in your heart. You begin to know me not merely as a distant historical figure or an abstract theological concept, but as a real, living, present person who loves you more than you can comprehend. And the more you know me in this relational way, the more you begin to love me, and the more you love me, the more you begin to delight in my presence. Genuine affection may not be manufactured or forced, but it can absolutely be cultivated intentionally through real relational intimacy with me. Then, Jesus showed me the second component of the test of love, and this was even more challenging and convicting than the first. He explained the second aspect with a seriousness that made all of heaven seem to hold its breath. Examine whether you have proven your love through real and costly sacrifice, Sebastian. Many people say they love me. They proclaim their devotion with passionate words. They sing emotional songs about their commitment to me, yet they have never demonstrated that supposed love through any significant or costly sacrifice. They want all the benefits of following me, all the blessings, all the salvation, all the eternal life, all the protection and provision, but when the moment comes to choose my will over their own comfort, when a concrete opportunity arises to prove their love through obedience that costs them something valuable, they consistently choose themselves. They choose their convenience, their prosperity, their reputation, their security. Genuine love is not merely a pleasant emotion or a nice verbal affirmation. Genuine love is tested and demonstrated through actions that cost something significant, through choices that require real sacrifice, through obedience that is inconvenient, difficult, or costly. Jesus then showed me scenes of Christians facing difficult decisions where they had to choose between obedience to Christ and personal convenience, between God's will and their own comfort, between honoring Christ and benefiting themselves. I saw a young businessman in Lyon who had the opportunity to close an extremely lucrative deal that would transform his financial situation and elevate his social status, but closing that deal would require compromising his Christian principles, deceiving a client, manipulating information, and doing things he knew were wrong. He knew exactly what God wanted him to do. He knew he should turn down the business, no matter how much money was at stake, but when the moment of truth arrived, he chose the money. He rationalized his decision by telling himself he needed to provide for his family, that the opportunity wouldn't come around again, that it wasn't really all that bad, and that God would understand. Yet deep down, he knew the truth. He had chosen himself over Christ and had failed to prove his love when doing so came at a significant cost. I saw a woman in Oaxaca who clearly felt God's call to missionary work, a call that had been in her heart for years, a call she knew was genuine and from God, but answering that call would mean leaving behind her comfortable, well-paid professional career, abandoning her comfortable lifestyle, giving up her financial security, and moving to a dangerous, uncomfortable place. She wrestled with this calling for years, always finding excuses to put it off, always rationalizing why the time wasn't right, always convincing herself she could serve God just as well from her current position of comfort. She loved the idea of serving God. She enjoyed talking about missions and even financially supported other missionaries. But when it came to personal obedience at significant personal cost, she simply couldn't do it. Her love for comfort was stronger than her love for Christ. A father in Guadalajara who knew God was calling him to invest far more time and energy into teaching his children about the things of God, into spiritually disciplining them, and into being an active spiritual leader in his home. But this would require sacrificing his personal leisure time, giving up his favorite hobbies, and cutting back on the hours spent working to advance his career. He knew what God wanted, yet his job, his hobbies, and his personal time always seemed more important, more urgent, and more appealing. He claimed to love God, but never demonstrated that love in practical ways that cost him something valuable. These, too, will fail the test, Jesus said, with a sadness that made the very atmosphere of heaven feel heavier, for love untested by sacrifice may not be real love at all. It is very easy to say you love me when it costs you nothing. It is simple to proclaim devotion when everything is comfortable and convenient, but when the moment comes to prove that professed love through difficult obedience, costly choices, and real sacrifice, requiring you to give up something you value, that is when the true state of the heart is revealed, that is when genuine love is separated from false love, that is when a distinction is made between those who truly love me and those who merely love the idea of loving me. But then Jesus showed me the contrast, and it was both glorious and convicting. There was a man in Tijuana who had to choose between keeping his well-paid job and compromising his faith in ways he knew God would not approve. His employer demanded that he do things that directly violated his Christian convictions, and when he refused, he was immediately fired. He faced months of financial hardship, His family had to make significant sacrifices. There were moments of great stress and anxiety, yet there was a deep peace in his heart because he knew he had proven his love for Christ through a costly choice, that he had chosen to obey regardless of the cost, and had demonstrated that his loyalty to Christ was stronger than his need for financial security. I saw a family in Chihuahua who left literally everything to answer God's missionary call, selling their comfortable home, giving up successful careers, and moving to a foreign country where they faced real danger, difficult living conditions, and separation from extended family and friends. Yet, they were radiant with joy because they knew they were demonstrating their love for Christ in a tangible and costly way. Their sacrifice was not a burden they resented, but an offering of love they gave joyfully. I saw countless Christians across Mexico and the world making daily choices to obey Christ, even when it was inconvenient, costly, difficult, or risky. Each of these choices, every act of costly obedience, every sacrifice made for the sake of Christ, was testing and strengthening their love. They were demonstrating the authenticity of their devotion. They were building a record of sacrificial love that would withstand the scrutiny of the rapture. These will pass the test of proven sacrificial love, Jesus said, with a joy that caused all of heaven to rejoice, for their love has been tested in the fire of costly obedience and found it genuine. They do not merely speak of loving me, they consistently demonstrate that love through actions that cost them something of value. They do not simply profess devotion, they prove it through real sacrifice. And when the moment of the rapture arrives and their hearts are examined, it will be evident that their love is authentic, tested, and genuine. The third component of the test was the most challenging, the most convicting, and the most important of all. Jesus turned toward me with an intensity in his eyes that made my soul tremble and said, "The third aspect, the one I consider the most critical of the three, examines whether I am truly supreme in your heart, not merely important, Sebastian, not simply a high priority among several others, but supreme, the first, the highest, the one you love more than anything or anyone else in your entire existence." The devastating problem with many of my followers is that they include me in their lives but do not make me supreme in them. They love me, but they love other things more. They serve me, but they serve other masters. They say I am their Lord, yet in the actual practice of their daily lives, their own desires, families, careers, comforts, material possessions, personal ambitions, and romantic relationships govern their decisions and priorities far more than I do. Jesus then showed me absolutely devastating scenes of Christians who professed deep love for him, yet whose actual lives revealed that other things had usurped the supreme place that belonged solely to him. There was a pastor in Merida who loved his ministry, success, reputation, influence, and platform more than he loved Jesus himself. His entire identity was wrapped up in being a successful, recognized religious leader, and although he preached about Christ, he was actually more in love with his own ministry than with the God he supposedly served. God was a means to achieve ministerial success rather than the supreme end of his entire existence. I saw a mother in Veracruz who idolized her children, making them the absolute center of her universe to such an extent God was always relegated to a distant second place. All her energy, thoughts, planning, and concerns revolved around her children. She prayed for them constantly but rarely spent time simply enjoying God's presence for its own sake. She read books on parenting but seldom read her Bible with the same hunger and intensity. Her children had taken the throne of her heart, a throne that should have belonged to Christ alone, and although she would have vehemently denied this had anyone pointed it out to her, the reality of her priorities' daily life made it obvious. I saw a businessman in Monterrey whose true devotion, his true God, was his financial success and professional advancement. He used God as a means to achieve prosperity. He prayed for material blessings. He quoted promises of prosperity. He attended church faithfully, yet his heart was actually completely captivated by wealth and status. God was useful for his prosperity goals but was not the supreme treasure of his life. Money had taken that place. I saw a young woman in Cancun whose true passion, her true focus, was finding romance and marriage. She prayed desperately for a husband. She fasted, begging God to bring her the right man. She attended every singles event at church, yet spent very little time cultivating her relationship with Christ himself. Jesus was important to her primarily as someone who could give her what she really wanted, a romantic relationship. Romance, rather than Christ, have taken the supreme place in her heart. In each of these cases, and in thousands more that Jesus showed me, these people would have sincerely claimed to love Jesus. They attended church, many of them faithfully, prayed regularly, read their Bibles, served in ministries, and gave their tithes. From the outside, they appeared to be committed, devoted Christians, but when Jesus allowed me to see the reality of their hearts, when I could observe not just their outward religious actions but their actual priorities, their true loves, and what really governed their thoughts and decisions, it became absolutely clear that Christ was not supreme. Other things, whether good or bad, legitimate or illegitimate, have taken the throne of their hearts. Jesus was relegated to a secondary role, perhaps important, but definitely not first, perhaps valued, but certainly not supreme. These, too, will fail the test of supreme love, Jesus said, and for the first time, I saw something akin to holy anger in his eyes, a fierce intensity that made me involuntarily recoil. They will fail, for I do not share my glory with another. I do not accept being second in anyone's heart. I do not tolerate competition for the supreme position in the lives of my followers. Either I am first, or I am nothing. Either I am the Lord of all, or I am the Lord of nothing at all. There is no middle ground, no compromise, no way to serve me half-heartedly while serving other masters as well. And when the moment of the rapture arrives and the final test examines every heart, those who have placed anything above me, no matter how good or legitimate that thing may be, no matter how noble or justifiable it seems, will be left behind, period. But then Jesus showed me the glorious contrast. He allowed me to see those who had truly made him supreme in their lives, and it was beautiful and deeply convicting to witness. I saw a young woman in Querétaro who had to choose between a promising romantic relationship, which would have eventually required her to compromise her faith, and remaining single while waiting for God's will. She chose Christ over romance. Even though it was painful and lonely, yet there was a radiant peace in her heart, for she knew that Jesus was her supreme love, far greater than any desire for marriage. I saw a man in Mexico City who had consistently placed the kingdom of God above his professional ambition, making career choices that had hindered his advancement and financial compensation, yet they had honored Christ and his principles. They had turned down promotions that would have required ethical compromises. They had accepted less prestigious positions because those roles allowed them to serve God better. Time and again, they had chosen Christ's will over their own prosperity, and now, Christ was clearly supreme in their hearts and in their decisions. I saw a family in Puebla that had made Jesus the absolute center of their home life, loving one another through Christ and for the sake of Christ, yet always keeping Christ as their highest love. Their children were important, but not idols. Their marriage was valuable, but Christ was more valuable. Their careers were necessary, but the kingdom of God was the top priority. They had systematically ordered every aspect of their family life under the lordship of Christ, and it was obvious, as one looked at their hearts, that Jesus reigned supreme. I saw countless believers across the nation and the world who had honestly and ruthlessly examined every area of their lives, every relationship, commitment, possession, ambition, and desire, to ensure that Christ remained first, that nothing usurped his supreme position, and that he truly reigned as Lord over all. They were not perfect. They still struggled and occasionally failed, but the overall direction of their lives, the priorities guiding their decisions, and the loves governing their hearts all clearly proclaimed that Christ was supreme. They will pass the test of supreme love, Jesus said with such intense joy that all of heaven erupted in celebration. They will pass because I am truly the Lord of their lives, not just in name or theory, but in the practical reality of their daily choices, their actual priorities, and their genuine loves. When the final test reveals the state of their hearts at the moment of the rapture, it will be absolutely clear that I hold the supreme place, that I reign as king over every area of their lives, and they will be taken home to be with me forever in eternal glory. Jesus then turned toward me with an intensity that caused my entire soul to focus completely on him and his words. He spoke to me with an urgency that I felt burning deep within my spirit. Now you understand the test of love that will determine who is caught up in the rapture and who is left behind to face the unimaginable horrors of the tribulation. It is not about sinless perfection, for everyone fails and sins. It is not about correct theological knowledge, although truth is important. It is not about religious activity, church membership, or observing external rituals. It is about love, genuine love that finds true delight in my presence, sacrificial love that has been tested and proven through costly obedience, supreme love that places me absolutely first, above everything and everyone, without exception. These three components together reveal whether someone truly loves me in the way required to be part of my bride, who'll be caught up. Jesus paused, letting his words sink deep into my soul, and then he asked the question that completely shattered me. Sebastian, if the test of love were to happen this very moment, if the rapture were to occur right now while you are here with me, would you pass? Do you have genuine affection for me, or merely a sense of religious duty? Have you proven your love through real sacrifice, or have you obeyed only when it was convenient? Am I truly supreme in your heart? Or are there other things governing your decisions more than me? Tears began to stream down my face as I honestly examined my own heart in light of those piercing questions, and what I discovered devastated me completely. I realized, with horror and deep conviction, that much of my Christian life had been duty without delight, religious activity devoid of genuine affection. I prayed regularly, yet it was often mechanical, rushed, and distracted. I read my Bible, but it was frequently merely informative rather than transformative, something I did to maintain a routine, not because I had a genuine hunger to know God more deeply. My worship in church was rote. I sang the songs, but my heart was often distant and cold. I was just going through the motions, lacking the genuine joy that comes from truly loving someone. I realized I had rarely put my love for Christ to the test through significant or costly sacrifice. When obedience was convenient and easy, I obeyed without issue, but when obeying would have cost me something important, when it would have required real sacrifice, I too often found excuses, rationalized compromises, and chose my own comfort over God's will. My love had never truly been tested or proven, because I had carefully avoided situations where I would have to demonstrate it through costly choices, and I realized, with a pain that cut to the very core of my being, that Jesus was not truly supreme in my heart the way he ought to be. I loved him, yes, I valued him, certainly, but my family, my career as an engineer, my professional reputation, my personal comfort, and my financial security, all these things frequently governed my decisions more than Jesus did. I included him in my life, attending church and participating in ministries, but I had not truly made him the supreme Lord of every area, the highest love above all other loves, the ultimate priority that determined all my other priorities. I wept, falling to my knees before him once more, completely broken by the conviction that I would fail the test. If the rapture were to happen right now, I would be left behind. My love for you is not what it should be, not what it needs to be. My devotion is superficial compared to what you are describing. My obedience has not been tested. You are not supreme in my life in the way you deserve to be. What do I do? How do I develop the kind of love that will pass this test? How do I transform my heart before it is too late? Jesus gently lifted me up, his hands touching my shoulders with infinite tenderness, and his eyes were filled with compassion, mercy, and radiant hope. He spoke to me with a kindness that made my soul melt. The simple fact that you honestly acknowledge the truth about the actual state of your heart is the critical first step toward transformation. The vast majority of my followers will never examine their hearts with such brutal honesty. They will never discover that their love is not genuine until it is too late, until the rapture occurs and they suddenly realize, with horror, that they have been left behind. But you now know the truth about your spiritual condition, and the truth, when embraced and acted upon, has the power to set you free and transform you completely. Then Jesus began to teach me exactly, specifically, and practically how to develop the kind of love that would pass the final test of the rapture. Genuine affection, he explained with patience and clarity, is cultivated intentionally through real, relational intimacy with me. You cannot genuinely delight in someone you do not know deeply and personally. You cannot passionately love someone with whom you spend very little quality time. If you want to develop real affection for me, you must stop treating our relationship as a religious obligation to be fulfilled and start treating it as a real personal relationship that requires time, attention, honest communication, and authentic vulnerability. Begin by regularly dedicating extended time to prayer, not merely reciting lists of requests as if making an order to the universe, but truly conversing with me, sharing your heart openly and honestly, and listening to my voice as I speak to you through my word and my spirit. Spend time in the scriptures, not merely reading to accumulate theological information, but meditating deeply to receive transformative revelation, seeking to know me as a person through the pages of my word. Spend time in genuine worship, not just singing songs mechanically, but expressing authentic love from your heart, pouring out your affection, and opening your soul in sincere praise. The more time you spend with me in this relational and intimate way, the more deeply you will know me, and the more deeply you know me, the more intensely you will love me, and the more intensely you love me, the more naturally you will delight in my presence. Genuine affection can be artificially manufactured or forced by sheer willpower, but it can absolutely be cultivated intentionally through an intimate and consistent relationship with me. Proven, sacrificial love, Jesus continued, develops through costly, intentional, and repeated obedience. You cannot prove your love if you never face situations where you must sacrifice something valuable. You cannot demonstrate genuine devotion if you always choose the easy and comfortable path. Begin by actively seeking opportunities to show your love through choices that cost you something significant. When I ask you to obey in a difficult matter, do not view it as an unfair burden you wish to avoid, but rather as a precious opportunity to prove the authenticity of your love. When a decision arises between my will, clearly revealed, and your personal convenience, deliberately choose my will regardless of the cost. When you must decide between pleasing me and benefiting yourself, choose to please me consistently. Every time you make a costly choice for my sake, every act of obedience requiring real sacrifice, you are proving your love and simultaneously strengthening it. Sacrificial love develops through the repeated practice of placing my desires above your own, my priorities above your comfort, and my glory above your personal gain. Supreme love, Jesus explained with profound seriousness, is established through the systematic and intentional reordering of absolutely all your priorities, relationships, commitments, and possessions under my absolute lordship. You cannot make me supreme by accident or through passive desire. It must be a deliberate, intentional decision followed by consistent, sustained action in every area of your life. Brutally examine every aspect of your existence. Do your finances truly reflect that I am your supreme treasure, or do they reveal that money and material security are your true gods? What about your relationships? Do you love people through me and for my sake, always keeping Christ as your highest love? Or have they become idols competing with my supremacy? Do you pursue your career as a platform to serve and glorify me? Or has it become an idol that governs your decisions more than I do? And your time, how do you spend it? Does it reveal that I am your top priority, or do other activities and commitments govern it more than your relationship with me? Be absolutely honest and unsparing in your self-assessment. Then, systematically begin the process of reordering everything to ensure that I am truly and practically first. This does not mean neglecting legitimate responsibilities or abandoning important relationships. It means putting everything in its proper place under my supreme leadership. When you love me supremely, you actually love everything else in a healthier, purer, and more right way. But I must always come first, in everything, without exception. But, Lord, I asked with growing urgency, how long does it take to develop this kind of love? And what if the rapture happens before I am ready? What if I run out of time? Jesus looked at me with a seriousness that made the full weight of eternity settle upon my shoulders. He spoke with an urgency I felt resonating through every part of my being. Time is extraordinarily short. The rapture could literally happen today, tomorrow, or next week. You have absolutely no guarantee of time to develop love gradually over years or decades. That is precisely why you must begin immediately, right now, and pursue this development with total intensity and absolute commitment. Genuine love can grow surprisingly fast when it is intentionally cultivated with all your energy and focus, if you dedicate yourself completamente, sin reservas, ad sola intimidad profunda conmigo, aprobata amor consistentemente a través de sacrificio real y hacem supremo en cada área sin exception. Sorprenderás de que un rápidamente de corazón puede ser transformado radicalmente, pro no sucederá sin esfuerzo intencional y sostenido, no ocurrirá automáticamente solo porque lo deseas vagamente, debes elegar este amor con toda tu energía, toda tu atención, toda tu determinación, debes hacer de esto tu prioridad absoluta por encima de todo lo demás, porque Sebastián, tu destino eterno está en juego. La eternidad completa depende de pasar esta prueba, y la prueba podrá ocurrir literalmente en cualquier momento sin aviso previo. Entonces, Jesús me mostró algo que cambió todo, algo que quedó grabado en mi alma con fuego eterno y que nunca podrá olvidar mientras viva. Mostró el momento exacto del arrebatamiento, cuando la prueba del amor ocurriría simultáneamente para cada persona en toda la tierra que profesara ser cristiana. Vi miles de millones de personas alrededor del mundo entero, en cada nación, en cada continente, en cada ciudad y pueblo, repentinamente teniendo sus corazones examinados instantáneamente por la luz penetrante del amor perfecto de Cristo, con una fracción de segundo, más rápido que un parpadeo. Cada persona que alguna vez había profesado fe en Cristo tuvo el verdadero estado de su corazón revelado completamente por el escrutinio sobrenatural de Dios, la presencia o ausencia de afecto genuino, la existencia o falta de amor sacrificial probado, la realidad o falsedad de la supremacía de Cristo, todo se volvió instantáneo y innegable, visible en ese momento de examen divino. Vi millones de cristianos verdaderos, personas que habían imitado a Jesus genuinamente, que habían cultivado afecto real, que habían probado su devoción a través de sacrificio costoso, que habían hecho de Cristo el supremo Señor de cada área de sus vidas. Repentinamente, vanishing from the earth in an instant, their mortal bodies were supernaturally transformed into immortal, glorified bodies in a fraction of a second and were caught up to meet the Lord in the air, while heavenly trumpets sounded and angels rejoiced. These were the ones whose love had passed the divine test, whose hearts had been examined by the fire of Christ's love and found full of genuine devotion, proven sacrifice, and the true supremacy of Christ in every area. But I also saw something that literally shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces and made me weep with a grief I cannot adequately describe in human words. I saw millions of other people, perhaps even more than those who were taken, who had sincerely believed they were Christians ready for the rapture, who had confidently assumed they would be caught up when Christ returned, suddenly realizing with absolute, indescribable horror that they had been left behind. These people were not atheists who openly rejected Christ, they were not wicked people living in open rebellion against God, they were regular members of evangelical and Catholic churches, they were religious leaders, pastors, Sunday school teachers, youth group leaders, and worship musicians. They were people who had faithfully attended church services for years or decades, they were people who had prayed regularly, read their Bibles, given their tithes, served in ministries, and participated in church events. From every outward perspective, they appeared to be committed, devoted Christians, yet their hearts had not passed the test of love. They had religion, but no real, intimate relationship. They had activity, but no genuine affection. They had a profession of faith, but no proven, sacrificial love. They had included Christ in their lives, but had never truly made him supreme above all else. The look on the faces of those left behind was something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was pure, absolute terror, mingled with total disbelief, utter despair, devastating regret, and the horror of realizing they had lost the opportunity for eternity, not because they were bad people or unbelievers, but simply because their love for Christ was not genuine, tested, and supreme. Now they would face the unimaginable horrors of the tribulation, 7 years of unprecedented suffering, not because they had rejected Christ, but because their devotion to him had been superficial, untested, and divided among multiple competing loyalties. Sebastian, he said, vanishing from the earth in an instant, their mortal bodies were supernaturally transformed into immortal, glorified bodies in a fraction of a second and were caught up to meet the Lord in the air, while heavenly trumpets sounded and angels rejoiced. These were the ones whose love had passed the divine test, whose hearts had been examined by the fire of Christ's love and found full of genuine devotion, proven sacrifice, and the true supremacy of Christ in every area. But I also saw something that literally shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces and made me weep with a grief I cannot adequately describe in human words. I saw millions of other people, perhaps even more than those who were taken, who had sincerely believed they were Christians ready for the rapture, who had confidently assumed they would be caught up when Christ returned, suddenly realizing with absolute, indescribable horror that they had been left behind. These people were not atheists who openly rejected Christ. They were not wicked people living in open rebellion against God. They were regular members of evangelical and Catholic churches. They were religious leaders, pastors, Sunday school teachers, youth group leaders, and worship musicians. They were people who had faithfully attended church services for years or decades. They were people who had prayed regularly, read their Bibles, given their tithes, served in ministries, and participated in church events. From every outward perspective, they appeared to be committed, devoted Christians, yet their hearts had not passed the test of love. They had religion, but no real, intimate relationship. They had activity, but no genuine affection. They had a profession of faith, but no proven, sacrificial love. They had included Christ in their lives, but had never truly made him supreme above all else. The look on the faces of those left behind was something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was pure, absolute terror, mingled with total disbelief, utter despair, devastating regret, and the horror of realizing they had lost the opportunity for eternity, not because they were bad people or unbelievers, but simply because their love for Christ was not genuine, tested, and supreme. Now they would face the unimaginable horrors of the tribulation, 7 years of unprecedented suffering. Not because they had rejected Christ, but because their devotion to him had been superficial, untested, and divided among multiple competing loyalties. Sebastian, he said, Jesus spoke with such intense urgency that I felt every word burning straight into my soul like liquid fire. You must return to earth. You must go back to your life. You must warn my people. You must tell them about this test of love that will determine their eternal destiny. There are millions of people who are completely unprepared, who confidently assume they are ready when, in reality, they are not ready at all. There are multitudes who have religion but lack the genuine love that will save their souls from the coming judgment. They must know the truth while there is still time to change. Tell them to examine their hearts with brutal honesty right now, while something can still be done about it. Tell them not to assume they are prepared based merely on religious activity, church affiliation, theological knowledge, or a verbal profession of faith. Tell them to ask themselves the hard questions and answer with painful honesty. Do I have genuine affection for Jesus, or is it just religious duty? Have I proven my love through real sacrifice, or do I obey only when it is convenient? Is Jesus truly supreme in my heart? Or are there other things that govern my decisions more than he does? And, Jesus continued, his voice trembling with emotion, if you honestly discover that your love is not what it should be, you must begin immediately, without a second's delay, to develop genuine love, not tomorrow when it is more convenient, not next week when you have more time, not next month when things settle down, but right now, today, this very moment, for the test of love could come at literally any time. The rapture could happen before they even finish hearing your testimony, and only those whose love is genuine, tested, and supreme will pass the test and be taken home. Before I could answer or ask further questions, I felt a powerful force beginning to pull me backward. The heavenly garden began to fade gradually from my view, the glorious presence of Jesus began to recede. Suddenly, I found myself being pulled back through the tunnel of light in reverse, moving away from heaven and back toward earth. The last thing I heard was Jesus' voice resonating across dimensions with absolute authority and urgency. Sebastian, do not waste this second chance I am giving you. Live with genuine love, cultivate real affection, prove your devotion, make me supreme, pass the test and warn everyone who will listen. I woke up several days later at the Craterham General Hospital, to the utter surprise and astonishment of the doctors and nurses, who informed me that I had been declared clinically dead at the scene of the accident. My heart had stopped beating for more than 10 minutes. I had suffered massive, devastating injuries that, by all medical standards, should have killed me instantly, or at least left me with severe, irreversible brain damage. Multiple broken ribs had punctured my lungs, my skull was fractured, I had suffered internal bleeding that should have been fatal, yet here I was, alive, conscious, speaking coherently, and completely transformed by what I had experienced on the other side. In the months that have passed since that life-changing day, my life forever, I have experienced a transformation so profound and radical that everyone who knows me notices the difference immediately. It is not because I am trying to impress God or earn my salvation through human effort. It is not because I believe I have to be perfect to be raptured. It is because my heart was truly transformed by what I saw and experienced. Now, I literally spend hours each day in intimate prayer with Jesus, and it is not a burden or a tedious duty, but a pure delight. I have discovered that the more time I spend with Him, the more deeply I know Him, and the more I know Him, the more intensely I love Him, and the more I love Him, the more I desire to be in His presence. Prayer is no longer an obligation I fulfill, it is the highlight of my day, the time I most long for and enjoy. I have actively begun to seek opportunities to prove my love through costly choices. When God clearly called me to leave my secure, well-paid job as a civil engineer to start a full-time ministry warning people about the test of love and the imminent rapture, I obeyed immediately, even though it meant significant financial insecurity for my family. When He asked me to completely forgive someone who had deeply and unjustly hurt me, I chose obedience, even though it was emotionally and psychologically devastating. Every time I choose Christ's will over my personal comfort, every time I sacrifice something valuable for His cause, I feel my love for Him growing stronger, deeper, more tested, and more authentic, and I have systematically and ruthlessly examined every area of my life to ensure that Jesus is truly and practically supreme. I have reordered my finances under His lordship, I have adjusted my relationships so that Christ is the highest love, I have restructured my use of time to reflect that He is my top priority. It is not perfect yet, I still struggle against my sinful flesh, I still fail and sin regularly, but the fundamental direction of my life has changed radically, because Jesus is now truly Lord, not just in theory or in Sunday words, but in the practical reality of my daily decisions and real priorities, and the peace I experience now is absolutely indescribable. I no longer live in fear of the rapture or with tormenting uncertainty about my spiritual readiness. It is not because I am sinlessly perfect, for I certainly am not. It is not because I have reached some mystical level of holiness, for I still have a long way to go. It is because I know, with certainty, that my love for Christ is genuine. I know I spend enough quality time with Him for my affection to be real and growing. I know I have repeatedly proven my love through costly choices that demonstrate its authenticity. I know He is supreme in my heart, governing my decisions and priorities above all other loves and loyalties. When the test of love comes, and I am absolutely convinced it will come very soon, possibly even today or tomorrow, I will pass, not because of my own righteousness or personal merits, for I have none, not because I am better than other Christians, for I am not, but because, through God's enabling grace, I have developed the kind of love that Jesus examines and requires. My heart has been transformed from mechanical duty to genuine delight, from empty verbal profession to costly, proven sacrifice, and from superficial religion to the real, practical supremacy of Christ in every area of my existence. And now, I share this message with absolute urgency with everyone willing to listen, with all who have ears to hear and hearts to receive. The rapture is extraordinarily near, it is at the very door. It could happen literally at any moment, without prior warning, and when it occurs, there will be a test of love that instantly examines the heart of every person professing to be a Christian. Those whose love is genuine, proven, and supreme will be taken to heaven to be with Christ for all eternity. Those whose love is superficial, untested, or divided will be left behind to face the horrors of the tribulation. The most important question you must ask yourself right now, at this very moment, as you read or hear these words, is this: if the test of love were to happen today, right now, would you pass? Do you have genuine affection for Jesus, truly delighting in His presence and finding deep satisfaction in your relationship with Him? Have you proven your love through costly obedience and meaningful sacrifice? Not only when it is convenient, but especially when it comes at a high cost. Is Jesus truly supreme in your heart, absolutely ruling every area of your life without competition from other loves or loyalties? If your honest, unself-deceived answer to any of these three critical questions is no, then you are completely unprepared for the rapture. Regardless of how often you have attended church, how many prayers you have recited, or how much religious activity fills your life, the test does not examine outward religion, it examines inward love. Only those whose love is genuine, tested, and supreme will pass and be taken when Christ returns. Yet, there is radiant, glorious hope. If you are reading this or hearing this testimony, there is still time. You can still do something about it. You can still transform your heart. You can still develop the love that will save your soul from the coming judgment. You can begin right now, at this very moment, to cultivate genuine love. Start by examining your heart with brutal, painful honesty. Specifically acknowledge where your love is lacking, where it is superficial, and where it is divided. Then, begin immediately, without a moment's delay. Second, cultivate genuine affection through extended, intimate time with Jesus. Begin to prove your love consistently through costly obedience, regardless of the price. Begin the process of making Jesus truly supreme in absolutely every area of your life, without exception. Do not wait another moment. Do not assume you have time to change gradually. Do not convince yourself that you can put this off until tomorrow, next week, or next month. The test of love could come today. The rapture could happen before you finish reading or listening to this testimony. The current state of your heart right now will determine your eternal destiny. There are no second chances after the rapture. There is no time for repentance once the test has revealed that your love was not